So this project was a co-curation together with Maike Thies, and she is teaching at the Zurich University of the Arts in the Department of Game Design. So she is really an expert, not only in games, but also in kind of new media and electronic arts and design. And Mike and me, we have been chatting for a long time that we wanted to do some sort of project together that is looking a bit more into the newer, more digital fields of design, because we felt an exhibition in this direction would be a necessary. It's very contemporary. There's a huge potential in it, and we wanted to do something. We had a few different ideas, but then we came up, or we landed on game design and games, because we think that this is one of the maybe largest design areas of today. And as a design museum, an obvious topic. And as a bit, if we look back in the history of our museum, we've only done an exhibition on games once in 1999. It was a very early, I would say, exhibition. It was very small. It showed, I think, around 5 or 6 games. And since then, nothing happened. And from 1999 to 2023, in game design and the development of games, a lot has happened. So much has happened. And this is mainly because of, or it has various reasons, but which maybe we will talk about in a second as well. But this led Mike and me to really kind of give the idea of an exhibition about game design all of our attention and kind of go forward with this project. But our exhibition now in 2023 focuses mainly on video games. But while it kind of begins very classic, kind of screen-based games, formats that you are maybe familiar with when you think about games, the exhibition then kind of slowly opens up towards other fields or other areas. At some point also becomes more maybe playful installation. It starts to border towards art, towards science. And so we're really trying to cover a lot of ground with one exhibition. But it does not cover analog games in that sense as well. Of course, there's always a bit an overlap between digital and analog. Some controllers, for example, are kind of very analog. One of them being your body, for example. There is one installation where you have to use your body to have an input. So there's always a certain overlap between the two worlds, or can we still say two worlds? I'm not sure, but between the digital and the real life, the analog world. But we are really focusing on games, on game design, on anything happening in a kind of a digital context. Since 1999, or since around the turn of the century or a millennia, a lot has happened, and there's many different drivers, but one of the main drivers, for example, is the arrival of the smartphone. This has been a huge change for games. Essentially, games had a really early peak in around the 80s, and then a bit of a collapse, and then I think around mid-80s, Nintendo came from Japan, and they decided that we sell really well with boys and young teenagers. So we are going to focus on boys and young teenagers. And this has then kind of from the 80s onward led to a very kind of restricted view on who gamers are and who will buy games, mainly younger teenagers, mostly male. And this really had a lasting impact up until 2000 and even a bit beyond. And then the smartphone has completely changed this. And today we are seeing that around half of all games are being played on an iPhone or on a smartphone. And a majority of these people, around 75% of the people who play games on a smartphone are actually women. So we have a huge increase in a female gaming population. The gaming world has been kind of cracked open, and we started to leave these stereotypes, these young teenage boys in the basement, gaming on their couch and drinking energy drinks. This has been really a stereotype that we started to really see fade away. And today the game scene and the gamers themselves are much more diverse than what we still have in our minds also. We see that these stereotypes are also very lasting. Also in preparation for this exhibition, we've heard so many of these repeated to us. That's like, this will be a show for teenagers, for kids. This will be a show for mainly boys and a male audience. And it's actually, this is really not true. And also if we see at the latest statistics, who plays video games, we see almost an equal gender parity almost. It's like 52% the male to 48% women, at least in Germany. This was the statistic for 2021. So we are really seeing almost a parity in terms of gender and who plays video games. So this is like one development. Another development has also something to do with the smartphone, but largely just the arrival of the internet. And this is the distribution of games has become a lot easier. Previously, you needed to have a publisher, you needed to burn CD-ROMs, you needed to have an edition, you need to find a shop that would sell your game. And through the arrival of software platforms like the Apple Store, like the Google Play Store, but also like very particular software platform distributions like Steam, for example. This has really opened up the market to not only the big studios, the AAA studios, the blockbuster studios, but also to a lot of independent studios, smaller studios that previously for them it was really, really difficult to bring out and release smaller productions, smaller games. And nowadays this has become so much easier and so much cheaper. And what we are witnessing today is that this has led to a huge growth in an indie scene. And of course, this indie scene, as we can imagine, they have a bit less financial pressure. They can risk more. They have maybe more creative freedom to produce what they think is cool, what is right. And this, for us, as the kind of makers of these exhibitions, was super interesting because you have such a variety of creativity, creative approaches, design approaches, coming also not only from small studios, but largely also driven by all of these indie studios. And it's such a lively scene that we are witnessing today. And this probably feeds again into the diversity of the gaming audience, because you will have games that tackle very contemporary topics. There will be games tackling the climate crisis. There will be games tackling gender equality, or questions of equality in total. They will tackle complicated topics that go way beyond just merely being a product of entertainment, as we maybe have known games until now, or maybe we're still thinking of games, as entertainment, but actually it goes way, way, way beyond that. And maybe you can compare games a bit to maybe film in a sense, or movies, as in a sense that even though it's still a very young medium, movies was also invented, I think, like 100 and 150 years ago. So it's not really in terms of art history, it's not really an old medium. It's not oil painting that has been around for forever. So movies were quite new. And in the last century, movies also had to kind of developed quite a lot. And at the beginning, maybe they were seen as a kind of a weird medium, maybe for nerds, and then it was entertainment only, and people saw it as solely entertainment. And at some point, you had a scene developed, maybe around the mid-century, of very kind of avant-garde French directors bringing out really independent movies. And suddenly, even museums started to consider movies as a kind of an art form, an art medium. And I think with games, we are seeing exactly the same type of development. That at the beginning, it was a bit a niche thing. Then it's maybe even now today, it's still considered a kind of mainly entertainment thing. But I think as this medium matures, and we will surely have more games going forward in this century, it will increasingly also the creativity and the artistic content in those games will be also very, very interesting to watch. And of course, as we see now, also museums are starting to wake up and see like, we can exhibit games. I think this development will only continue. And maybe if we think forward, what this century will bring, maybe games as a medium will be one of the maybe the most important creative medium and creative art form being with us this century. If we think maybe where the metaverse is going, already games today are like a majority, or they bring in more revenue than movies and music combined. So there's a huge growth that we've been witnessing over the past 20 years. And I'm really glad to be alive to see like where will this where will this develop in? What will this be developing? And also like what sort of creativity will this bring forward? So we have many games that simply kind of take a kind of the climate crisis as some sort of a storyline. So for example, we have one game called Far Changing Tides, and it's about a flooded world where you have to kind of, as a player, you have to inquire what went wrong with this world. Why is there so much water? And while you're swimming and diving and continuing to advance throughout this game world, you discover a kind of a plot line that has very strong hints at kind of a climate crisis that has happened. And of course, this kind of dystopian type of storyline you will find also in other games. For example, in Harold Hollywood, which is set in a spaceship drifting along in space, searching for a new planet. And while you play it, you also get a kind of a hint that actually we messed up our original Earth, and therefore that's why they're in this spaceship, and that's why they encounter these problems that they're encountering. So we see this quite a lot, that as a storyline, it takes it's quite prevalent in many different games. But there's also other games, for example, Terra Nil from South Africa, that kind of really takes on the climate crisis as and implements it as a game mechanic. So in Terra Nil, you're starting out with a barren wasteland, and your job is to bring nature and the flora and fauna back into its kind of in a perfect harmony, in a perfect state. You need to put a lot of, or invite back a lot of greenery and create the conditions of a thriving natural environment. And it's quite clever because they're using a very classic game mechanic called like a city builder. But previously, a city builder has always been like you arrive in a perfect island and then you start to build up your civilization, you build up your village, you build up your city, you exploit the nature, the resources. And once you're done with this island or whatever piece of land you're sitting on, you will colonize the next island next to it, which is still green. And then you start to mess up this other island. So as you can see, this is a narrative that has probably, as we now know, has led to many problems globally. This kind of colonial-driven exploitation of natural resources. So Terra Nil is quite cleverly kind of putting this on its head by allowing you to start with a barren island or a barren wasteland and then trying to actually bring back nature and bring back the animals. These are just some examples here, maybe that where climate crisis or the climate topic really plays a role. We try to establish games somewhere beyond just being an entertainment product. And the way we did this was by really focusing on or playing with the white cube aesthetic. Because a white cube is usually kind of this white exhibition space where art is usually shown in an art museum where you see the paintings hung on the wall. Therefore, we try to really keep the exhibition fairly clean, fairly white, very kind of reduced from a kind of a design perspective, to kind of give the visitor a hint a bit that games are actually also sort of art, or at least have a creative and an artistic value. So that was like one of the drivers. Another main driver in the design of the exhibition is that we really wanted to set out rather compact spatially. So when you come in, everything is rather small and it's quite packed with different games. And the games we're showing in the beginning of the exhibition, maybe in the first third or in the first half, are rather standard type of games in the way it's usually screen-based games that you have a controller to play with. And then as the exhibition goes up, it spatially opens up. It gives you more space to walk around in. And at the same time, also content-wise, it opens up. So we start to kind of really go into the fringes of games and game design towards art, towards games and theater, towards games and science, towards games and installations, or games and philosophy. So really, as you go through the exhibition, it's starting to open up and give you more space, and kind of also hopefully opens up your mind. I mean, that's as a metaphor, kind of towards what games could be and what game design could be today. Because games and game design is in such flux. This is development rapidly. Probably as we speak, we should have probably already do a new, or we could next year, we could already open a new exhibition and it will look completely different. So what we are seeing is extremely quick development in games and what they could be. We do try to address questions that are being asked right now, in a sense that, for example, the humanoid that you mentioned is part of the exhibition, in a sense that we are showing the meta-human curator. This is a tool that is developed inside of the Unreal Engine, which is a kind of very common gaming engine where you can develop visual levels and characters in, and then later games will run in this engine, so to speak. And in this meta-human creator, you can create a human looking like human lookalikes, characters, avatars, very easily. And it opens up a kind of a domain that was previously very elite. You had to be a game designer, probably very fluent in a 3D CAD software to be able to build your own human avatar. And the meta-human creator allows you with very few clicks to create a very intricately detailed model of a human, change its height, change its lips, change its eyebrows, change its stature, change its clothing. And then the idea would be that obviously you can import it then to all the different games that play in the Unreal Engine, all the different metaverses that will be running on the Unreal Engine. So there we are really seeing the ease of use, that the development of these worlds, of these gaming worlds and gaming characters, how this is kind of trickling down, and we can only expect that it will only get easier and more available to more people. So that's like one topic. With AR and VR that you mentioned, we are seeing currently in gaming that this is somehow at a turning point, and we're not quite sure if this will really prevail. Of course, Mr. Zuckerberg is very convinced of the VR applications, but as we are seeing also his meta business, let's see where this is going. So in terms of gaming, VR is, we're not seeing a lot of AR games other than Pokemon Go, which has been quite around for quite some time. So the AR, not sure how much potential is in it. And the VR, we are seeing some use, and probably in a fitness gaming context, VR gaming will be very, very popular. But also, I mean, what is it? I think Sony just released a new VR headset, so let's see what's coming there. But for us right now, it's very difficult to kind of do a prognosis where this will be heading. But obviously, maybe in 5 years, we will do another exhibition on games, and it will maybe be solely focused on VR because this has completely obliterated everything. But I'm a bit skeptical, but let's see where this will be going. I mean, yeah, one thing is definitely the content that is in the games, the storylines, what's going on. We're seeing games that come out of a very critical of war, maybe also in the current, I mean, war is always a good topic, but currently it has at least in Europe, a very particular approach. So we are seeing this. We are seeing the climate crisis in games. We are seeing various other topics of inclusivity, for example. So I think game designers are very attuned to the contemporary topics, and they will definitely include this in their work. So that's like one thing. Then also you have a technical thing. It becomes much easier today to develop games. So we are seeing more smaller studios, for example. So this is also a sign of our times to have like all of these indie studios putting out these very creative titles. So yeah, I think game design as a whole is very much a child of its time. So the gamification of our reality. That is a very nice sentence. I'm not sure if we're witnessing a gamification of our reality, but what we're definitely seeing is that there is a huge interest in from the movie sector, maybe also a bit a slight, not, I wouldn't say panic, but they're definitely scared. The movie producers are a bit scared of games because the games have just simply been growing so much, and the production budgets of games have been growing so much in the past. When we have been saying a game development of a budget of $100 million would have been a huge production. I think now we are seeing a lot of blockbuster games that have a X-fold of this $500 million. So it's quite games are growing rapidly, and I think especially movie producers are a bit scared, I would say, or now a bit scared. And it's quite nice to see that there is the Last of Us as a series that is a kind of, first there was the game, and then they produce a video series out of it. And I think in the future we will probably see quite a bit more of these kind of interactions where we will have characters that maybe spawned in or were created for a video game or in a video game storyline, that this then kind of crosses over into movies, into series, and maybe also vice versa. I mean, there was also some cases where it was kind of successfully transported from movies into games. There's also a lot of examples where it didn't work at all. But I think going forward in the future, we will see much more kind of cross-referencing, or a cross inspiration, that a game world will inspire the spawning of a series. But if this will lead to a gamification of our reality, I don't know. I mean, it has a huge influence. I mean, video game culture has a huge influence on popular culture. And I mean, it's not surprising if you consider how many people are into games, are playing games. It's such a huge audience. And of course, this will spawn memes. This will influence the way we speak. And this will also influence the way we different subcultures even exist. For example, I mean, cosplay has been around for a really, really long time. It was mostly driven by people who recreated costumes from movie characters that people they've seen in movies. And nowadays we are seeing a huge scene, not only in Asia, but also in Europe, of cosplay that is directly inspired by gaming characters, gaming avatars. And in the exhibition, we're also showing Martina Hugentobler, a Swiss cosplay artist, also a game designer in her full-time job, but in her free time, she develops these absurdly, crazily detailed and with so much love and care constructed costumes that she then wears to different events. And they are fantastic to see because they, in a lot of their costumes, she picks up on this polygonal aesthetic that she finds in games, these faceted type of surfaces. And when she's wearing these costumes, then in the real world, it's really interesting to see for the eye, because you're really not quite sure. You're quite puzzled. Am I in a game now? Because like when I look at her, it's very kind of pixelated look. Or am I not in a game? We do see, well, it's not surprising considering how many people play games. This is huge. This is so big. But we will only see more and more of our real life, maybe not being gamified in a sense. Probably this, because gamifying probably harks back more to a kind of a game mechanic. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if our lives are more being influenced by game mechanics in a sense, but definitely that the culture of video games has a huge influence and will only be seen more in our real life, so to speak. No doubt. I mean, this is also super interesting, because if you would have told people, I don't know, 15 years ago that this will be a huge thing, people watching other people playing video games, they would have probably shaken their head and said, like, you're insane. So that's what I also mean. Like, I'm really curious and intrigued to see where this gaming thing what it will develop in, because I'm sure in 10, 15 years, there will be completely new areas that have come out of nowhere that we couldn't have anticipated, way beyond kind of saying, we will now invest so many $1 billion in VR, and then we will have VR games, which kind of seems very simple. So I'm much more interested in all these new areas that will creep up between the cracks and become huge, and nobody will have been seeing them coming. I actually quite enjoy myself personally. I do watch quite a few of them. Also, maybe because I don't know why, but I actually quite enjoy watching other people play, because usually they're also better than me playing. Which is also the esports, another area. I mean, this is fantastic to see suddenly a completely new sporting area pop up. I think so far global adaptation is still very mixed from region to region. But if you look at South Korea, this is huge. The players are proper rock stars. There is a lot of money in it, huge audiences, a lot of fans. It's really interesting to watch these fields develop and be alive in our time, I guess. It was really interesting because I work in exhibitions, so for me doing exhibitions is kind of what I know, and for me it's fairly I know it a bit. And working with game designers was really interesting in a sense that for a lot of them it was maybe one of the first major exhibitions they've been in. Not all of them, of course. Some of them were very routinely in kind of the setting up and kind of dealing with the development of their contribution. But for maybe even a majority, this was still kind of very new, this idea that a cultural institution would show their game, would display their game. So for me, this was very an enriching experience to kind of realize that, like, actually what we are doing here is really has not been done a million times. And a lot of these game design studios, they were also, at the beginning, we almost needed to not convince is too much, but we needed to kind of explain a bit like why we wanted to do an exhibition, that the work they've been doing and been selling to gamers is actually also has a very much an artistic and creative value, and therefore it should be exhibited in a museum. So I think this was for me like a very, very interesting exhibition, because in a sense, when you contact an artist, or you contact a designer, or maybe an architect, they're very familiar with the idea that maybe their work can be shown in a museum if they're good, or if it has a value, or if people are interested in it. But with game design, I felt from time to time that this was still something that we needed to explain. Actually, yes, there is a creative value in what you do, and that's why we want to exhibit it. And this is the way we want to exhibit your work. And I think this was a really interesting experience in developing this exhibition. I think when we were developing the exhibition, we were internally having quite a lot of discussions about this topic. Who will be the audience of this? Because we don't have a lot of experience in putting on exhibitions about game design, about games, or about digital media in general. It's not like we do all sorts of exhibition in this field. So for us, it was a really big question mark. And from the get-go, I think we were quite sure that this would probably be a topic that will allow a younger audience to come. And this was also my hope, that a younger audience will attend the museum. I will come to this in a second. But I was also, both Mike and me were both hoping that we would also be able to bring in an older generation, because also if you look at the average age of today's gamer, I think it's somewhere between like, what is it, 38 or 42, something like that. So it's much older than you would think. It's not the classic, it's like the teenager that plays games. No, actually, these gamers have grown old in the meantime. So we were really hoping that we would also manage to get an older generation in. And what we are seeing now is fantastically interesting, that we are seeing multiple generations come to the museum. So there's not only, of course, there will be the kids and a younger audience that is coming, but they're bringing along a kind of course, their parents, which are also still gamers and interested in it. But very often we even see like 3 generations coming together to the museum. So there will be the grandparents, their kids, and their kids kind of coming to the museum together. in the hope, I think the grandparents are hoping that maybe their kids will kind of show them a bit like how to do the controllers and how to get into the gaming thing. But it's such a lovely picture to see like multiple generations visiting our museum together. And as I previously have said, yeah, if you look at museums in general, usually museums have a rather an older audience, because I think retired people maybe simply have a bit more time to attend a museum that the working age people. So we always have a somewhat a lean towards more kind of an older generation. So for me, it's such a lovely picture to see that we're opening up the museum to a younger audience, which obviously will also be our future visitors, if you think about it like that. And that we also managed with this exhibition to really tackle everyone from a very young age up to a really old, and bring them together in the museum. And hopefully maybe they take away something new about games or something new about game design while they were here. So I think all in all, I'm really happy with not only the attendance numbers, but also the diversity of the audience that is actually coming to the museum to see this exhibition about games and game design. I'm really hoping that they kind of take away this exhibition as a cross-section of today's game landscape. I would hope that they dive into this world and maybe they find some areas that they find interesting. Maybe not all of them, of course not, but maybe some of them they think, oh, wow, this is quite cool, or that's something that I would like to see more of. And they take this away and they go away with a kind of a changed idea of what games are. Maybe hopefully with a bit an idea that there is people who are actually designing these games. Maybe that this is made by various creatives coming together and building these games, so that hopefully we can manage to communicate the designers that are behind these titles, these games. And also ideally, I think hopefully they go away with a sense that there is just simply so much creativity in today's games and game design worlds. And if we manage that, I think then that would be hugely successful. But then again, everyone comes to the museum for a very different reason and background. Some just want to simply have a good time. And I think I really do hope that with this exhibition, which is so interactive, so playful, I think even if you simply want to come to the museum to have a nice 1-2 hours with your friends or with your colleagues, I think that's also absolutely fair. As I previously said, I think for our museum, it's we're mostly we're showing graphic design, we're showing product design, we're showing architecture, photography, and all of these fields so far have not been yet completely focused on like new digital areas in these fields. So I'm very happy that in the past few years we've really managed to put on more shows that are looking into new areas of design, digital areas of design. So going forward, I'm simply hoping that we can manage to continue this trend, to really include these new fields, these new areas, and put together really interesting and kind of contemporary topics and exhibitions in the museum.